What's going on, everyone? Happy holidays. Jim here. Guys, I wanted to give you guys a quick little update on the vehicles. I did a build video on the TF2 build series, 3 videos, 28 minutes long. Had some camera snafus with, or cell phone snafus with memory issues and things like that. Camera flash getting too hot, shutting things off midway through. Had a lot of issues, so I figured I'll just give you guys a quick walkthrough on the vehicle or vehicles and let you know what all has happened over the Christmas holiday. Alrighty guys, WLtoys. Unfortunately, the WLtoys is down for the moment. The last video I did with the truck, I was trying to climb up some snow-covered stairs. I had those 2.2 Proline Super Swampers on the vehicle. Set of single weighted tires on the front, roughly a little over 13 ounces per tire. No weights in the back. Ended up burning up the ESC on that truck. Didn't necessarily know it at the time. I was getting tongue-tied. I thought the battery was actually just dead on the truck. A friend of mine came over the holidays. I fired up the vehicle for him to give him a little demonstration. Tires were jitting back and forth from forward to reverse. A little poof of smoke from the ESC. I unplugged it with the quickness. ESC was nuclear hot. I threw the truck outside and let it cool down. So I don't know what's wrong with that. I think I cooked the ESC. Pretty obvious that I cooked the ESC. So the Traxxas VXL 3S is kind of down for the moment. So that truck, gonna have to get a new ESC for it. And a side note, that Metal Gear that I ordered from WLtoys USA finally showed up. That showed up the day after Christmas. That's supposed to be the spur gear for the WLtoys. But I'm running that Kevlar Team Losi gear in there right now, and it's working out pretty good. But at least I guess I have a metal spur gear sitting on the side. Alright guys, on to the mighty trail finder, or not so mighty from the last snow video. Alright guys, in a previous video, I had this truck severely overweighted, or overloaded, trying to tow that NQD boat trailer up a hill. Had a double row of weights in one set of these tires, weighing 17.55 ounces apiece, just over a pound per tire. In a single row in the back, just over 13 ounces. Plus a spare tire in the back of the truck with no weights in it. That was 9 ounces on its own. The boat and the trailer wheels are stock TF2 wheels, the stock wheels. They have a single row weight in them. They weigh just over 7 ounces apiece. Boat has a Traxxas VXL 3M brushless system. Savox servo, receiver, a bunch of styrofoam, wireless winch controller for lights, LiPo battery. Whole package, probably just under 2 pounds. So truck and trailer combined, right around 18 pounds, or 18 pounds trying to roll up that hill. So overloaded the 35 turn motor that was in it. That was the original motor that I had in there. It had been in there since day one, a little over 10 months. When I looked at the motor, it still had plenty of brush left on it. So, not too sure exactly on, how good that motor actually was. I actually noticed something with my battery as well. When I was working on the truck over the holiday. I didn't notice it prior, and I think it actually happened when I browned out the motor climbing up that hill. Once again, that motor did kick out some smoke when I was climbing up the hill, so pretty sure it was fried. But, once again, my battery might have something to do with it. Since then, guys, since all that stuff happened, that set of wheels that had the double row of lead weights in them, I took them apart. I took that double row out. It just proved to be too much. It was too much stress on the leaf springs and suspension system on the truck. Not so much the axles. They seem to hold up to it pretty good, but they weren't on there that long, so who knows how long they would actually last. But I did break a leaf spring with those heavy weighted tires, trying to climb over that one darn asphalt curb. So just trying to hoist the weight of the tire, hitting the curb, and the back tires, pushing the truck forward, and this tire is pushing backwards on the axle, and you're trying to get all that weight up an incline. It was just too much. So I took all that row weights. So I currently have 4 tires with absolutely no weight in them, and 2 tires that have a single row in them. That last snow video, the truck had the single row on the front and no weights on the back, and an empty spare tire sitting in the back too. So next video with the truck, I have a 3S LiPo in it currently, the one for my WLtoys. 2200 milliamp 45C, so it ought to be kicking it out pretty good. But it's a 65 turn motor, so we'll get what we get, I guess. Put these paddle tires on there, plastic wheels, took all the weight out of the back of the truck, so hoping to do a little bit better on the next snow run. So the truck has been lifted over the holidays, guys. Previously, it did have a suspension lift on it, RC 4-wheel drive, super lift suspension lift blocks. I had a single large lift block on the front, no lift blocks on the rear, and RC 4-wheel drive ultimate scale 100 millimeter shocks on all four corners. Glenda 2 shock hoops on the front. I added another large lift block to the front, and I also added some RC 4-wheel drive super lift axle degree shims. And I have some leftover axle degree shims right here. If I can get the focus on, there's a couple of these guys that are stacked together with some little wedges right here. So I added some of these guys. These are super lift RC 4-wheel drive axle degree shims. Have some leftover lift blocks here, some dog hair, of course. Some smaller lift blocks and some medium-sized lift blocks. I had two lift kits all together, so I had a lot of these blocks. Added a couple blocks to the rear axle as well, and I also had to put an extension on my steering linkage. Get in nice and close here, guys. Yeah, let me find something to point at here. Alright, so initially I had one large lift block. I added one more large lift block and a degree shim. You might be able to see the degree shim over on this side, little wedge going on there. The bolts, you have to excuse the bolts, they're too long for the truck, but they were the only ones that I had that were actually long enough to do the job. They're an inch and a half from end to end is how long those bolts are. Had to add another little spacer to my steering linkage. The original spacer came up to about here, and then the linkage screwed in on top of that. I basically had an M3 26 millimeters screwing up through the bottom with a lock nut on top initially. Currently I have an aluminum spacer here. This is threaded. The screw goes halfway up into the spacer. The little arm coming off of the steering knuckle, that is also threaded. I basically took this M3 screw, threaded it into this steering knuckle, snugged it down, took the spacer, ran it down on top of that screw, snugged it down with a pair of pliers, and then ran another M3 screw in on top. So this is going to be a weak spot. I'm probably going to have to keep an eye on that just to make sure that everything stays together. This actual spacer that I used is painted black. It was aluminum colored. That is a leftover spacer from when I rotated my motor into the chassis on the truck. When I clocked my motor into the chassis, I had to cut off part of the original motor plate, and I had one of these spacers left over that I cut off, and that is it right there. And if we get in here and take a peek, that is one of these spacers right here, but it came off of the top half of the motor plate. You can see up there by that electrical wire by the frame, you can see that little chunk of aluminum that's hanging there. That is what is left over from when I made the cut. Needed to do that to make room, for that chassis, or for the motor plate to rotate into the chassis. I don't know who originally came up with the idea of rotating the motors into the chassis. Excellent ideas for whoever that was, man. Big props to whoever that was that came up with that idea. I first seen that on RC Sparks' channel. One of Aaron's friend, Dave Jr. did that with a RTR version of a TF2. Thought it was brilliant, and I Googled it. I found a couple videos on it, did it myself. I did that from day one when I initially built the truck, so that's been there for quite some time. So that basically covers the front lift. Now, I guess it doesn't. The shocks, guys. All right. I lifted the truck, but I didn't do anything with the suspension. You would think I would have to add longer shocks. I had purchased some Boom Racing 110 millimeter shocks to put on this truck. But you know what, guys? I measured the travel on the Boom Racing shocks. Look at that. I just broke my RC Sparks. Was just talking about this on a video. The plastic steering arm there. The little Pittman arm on the servo. I just broke that. That's been on there since day one, too. Son of a gun. I do have an aluminum one for that, but I was, rocking that plastic one since day one. So, all right, guys. Nevertheless, the shocks. These are RC four-wheel drive Ultimate Scale 100 millimeters. I measured these out against the Boom Racing 110 millimeters. They have the same size upper shock body, and they have the exact same amount of travel, which is 1.1/16, I believe, or 1.1/8. 1.1/8 is the travel on these shocks. Same thing on the RC or on the Boom Racing shocks. Sorry guys, I said 1.1/8, 1.1/16 total travel on the shock. Same on the Boom Racing shocks. Only difference with the Boom Racing shock is that they had longer end links down here at the bottom than the stock RC four-wheel drive shock end links, and the piston on the shock was slightly longer. Other than that, same amount of travel. So I wasn't going to gain anything by putting those Boom Racing shocks on here. I'm not gaining anything by putting these end links on here. All I basically did was adapted my 100 millimeter shocks to fit this lift. If I get some true 110 millimeter shocks, I'll be able to take advantage of the lift blocks. But as it is, I'm not gaining any more suspension or articulation than I had before. But you know, if I had true 110 millimeter shocks, I would be able to take advantage of that lift. All right, instantly looking at the back of the truck, guys. On the back of the truck, I added a small lift block, a medium-sized lift block, and another degree shim, medium-sized wedge on this side. I actually also added another leaf spring to my pack. I normally run just the main spring and the smallest spring. I added another spring to try to eliminate axle wrap. I should have mentioned I don't like running lift blocks because they increase axle wrap. These lift blocks are just temporary until I can actually get some portal axle units for my truck. You know, the portal axle units will change the axle's position relative to the center of the wheel. So instead of it coming in down here, it's going to be coming in up here because it's going to have a little gear drive going down to the wheel. So essentially that'll be giving you a suspension lift without actually lifting your suspension. So these lift blocks are just temporary until I get some portals. But you know what, guys? I did the math on the portals, man, and for my complete setup, you know, prices vary and people's setups are different. But for what I looked up for my particular situation, the price of putting portals on this truck is pretty comparable to the price of a brand new TRX4. And I kind of want to get a TRX4 too, so it's probably going to be a minute for these portals. Nevertheless, you know, don't necessarily like adding the lift blocks just because they add axle twist. You know, it's giving you more leverage to twist up the springs. As far as end links, here's the RC four-wheel drive end link, Boom Racing end link. So it gives you a little idea on how much I actually, you know, what a difference it was just between the end links. Like I said, I just put these end links on here to adapt my shocks to the suspension lift. You know, not gaining any more travel or articulation. Once again, if I had true 110 millimeter shocks, I could take advantage of this lift. But as is, I just basically put adapters on my 100 millimeters to make them work. And you know, same deal. Once again, same amount of travel as the Boom Racing ones. Boom Racing just has longer pistons and longer end links. That was the only difference between the two. All right, guys, another thing I want to touch base on real quick. The next set of shocks that I do get for this truck will be shocks with the spring on the outside of the body. Any internally sprung shock, whether it's Boom Racing, whether it's RC four-wheel drive, as soon as you put a stiffer spring in here, you're actually going to be losing suspension travel because you're trying to compress more material inside this chamber. Softest spring is going to give you the most travel. Stiffest spring is going to give you the least amount of travel. I thought about using these shocks on my truck because they are better shocks than the RC four-wheel drive shocks. Well, at least they seem to be. But I was going to have to run a stiffer spring in it, and I was going to be losing even more travel, you know, than what I normally would, but just by putting these on here. So I didn't use them. That's just one of the reasons I use the RC four-wheel drive shocks. This one's got the stiffest spring in it. This one has the softest spring. See, they just... Sometimes it doesn't want to return, but it's kind of working right now. Once again, these don't even bottom out half as far as the RC four-wheel drives do. The RC four-wheel drives come up just, you know, bottom out right about where my thumbnail is there. Once again, these have slightly longer pistons. Shock body is basically the same length as the RC four-wheel drive. But here, I'll try to get one of these down. The softest spring and the stiffest spring. I'll get these guys side by side here. Oh, there we go. So there's the difference in what you're losing in travel between the softest spring and the stiffest spring. Not much travel, you know, once you put that stiff spring in there. So, yeah, just something to keep in mind with internally sprung shocks. You know, as soon as you add a stiffer spring, you're losing travel. Once again, that's why I want to get a set of true 110 millimeter shocks with the spring on the outside. That way I can change my spring rate without actually sacrificing suspension travel. Alright guys, well, I took the tire off. My shock is still attached. I'm trying to get full sag out of it, but I'm probably not going to be able to do that. Try to get this boom racing shock right up next to it. Get my thumb out of the way. Just to show you that the boom racing shock body isn't any longer than the RC four-wheel drive shock body. Once again, 100 millimeters, 110 millimeters. I'm not trying to say anything bad about boom racing. I like their products. You know, I have a lot of boom racing stuff on my truck. So, you know, not trying to say anything bad about them. Just, you know, letting you guys know that it wasn't a true 110 millimeter shock. So, especially if I can get this thing totally stretched out. Yeah, like I said, the piston is just a little bit longer, but the travel, you're not getting any more travel than what you are with the RC four-wheel drive shock. These all put together with that end link on them, it is a longer shock than this 100 millimeter shock. And overall length, it is longer. But it, like I said, it doesn't have any more travel than what this shock has. So, you know, just another reason why I didn't want to run these. And FYI, I'm currently running Boom Racing 20 millimeter wheel spacers to clear these paddle tires. So just another Boom Racing product that I'm using. All right, guys, here is a quick peek at our new pinion angles here on the drive shaft to ring and pinion on the axle. Back axle looks okay with that degree wedge on there. Front might be a little bit too friendly, and I really don't like how much it's actually rotating the axle forward. It would be nice if the steering knuckles were adjustable so you could bring that back a little bit. But I might want to put a smaller shim on that to try to bring that pinion down slightly. But that's what we're looking at currently. Alright guys, now here is the LiPo battery that was in my TF2. This had been in there since day one. Plastidip since day one. RC King 7200 milliamp 2S LiPo 25C. I put these dots across the top so you can see how much it expanded. Like I said, that expansion wasn't there before I went up that hill. When I had it all overloaded, this fault line going around the battery wasn't there. It is a hard case battery, and it has been plastidipped. But after I plastidipped it, that seam from the case wasn't there anymore. But since it expanded, it actually split that seam apart, and it's starting to stretch to plastidip. The battery doesn't get warm when you drive the truck. It doesn't get warm when you charge it. Looking on my charger, both cells are relatively even. But I don't have a way to do like a voltage drop test or anything like that on it to see how it handles that kind of a situation. So once again, I'm not too sure how damaged this battery actually is, but it is bubbled up on the bottom and it is bubbled up on the top for sure. Once again, all my plastidipping things, anytime I say I plastidip something, guys, I learned that from watching RC Sparks. I never knew about it until then, and it's an awesome idea. It doesn't make things 100% waterproof, but if you do a diligent job at it, you can make things pretty well watertight. I mean, you're never going to be able to stop water from actually leaking or seeping in through the wire casing and getting down into the battery. But it's gonna take a lot to do that. My first couple layers of plastidip, I'll apply it with a spoon. Make sure I get it around the cables. That's the first thing I do is I coat around the cables. Try to fill in any kind of gaps. Make sure I get plenty of plastidip between the wires. That way the water can't seep between the wires. And try to do that, as best you can before you actually dunk the whole battery in plastidip, which I did as well. Probably 3 or 4 times just to make sure I had a healthy coating on it. So it didn't, rub through on the bottom of the truck, or whatever, get rubbed off from the bottom of the truck going down the trail or whatever, from sliding around and whatnot. And also one thing you want to keep in mind is your battery cable position, where it needs to be when you install the battery into your vehicle. Like the first time I dipped a couple batteries, I just hung them by the wires, And after I got done, everything was all solid over here, you know, and I couldn't get the body on, so I had to cut away the Plastidip and reposition the battery and apply more Plastidip to get it, you know, or reposition the cables and apply more to get it in the right spot. So just keep in mind, if you're ever going to Plastidip a battery or something, to pay attention to where your cables need to be. And you have to excuse me, guys, for talking fast. I'm trying to get this video done in less than a half hour here. So next video, guys, I took all the weight out of the back of the truck, or the bulk of the weight, trying to lighten this thing up as much as possible. But another new thing that I added to the truck over the holidays, I added some tow chains back in the bed. These guys right here. Same kind of chain that I used on my trailer for some trailer hitch chains. I think it's called Plant Jack chain. I bought it at my local hardware store, and it's for hanging flower pots. Basically got, I don't know, 20 or 30 feet for like $4. But I added some magnetic mounts in here. I glued some big fat magnets to the bottom half of my bed. That way those chains can't fall out anywhere. But I'll show you that here in a second when we take the body off of it. First and foremost, guys, for the new guys, the truck does have a body lift on it. I did that before I even put a suspension lift on the truck. Did the body lift first, and that was to clear some 2.2 RC four-wheel drive mudslingers. This is a piece of plastic from a pond filter pump cover, roughly 1/16 of an inch thick, 3.5 inches long by 1.5 or 1.25 inches high, and it's exactly 3/4 of an inch from bolt hole to bolt hole on here. So it has a 3/4 inch body lift on the truck, first and foremost. And it's only held in by these screws. The body pins in the back, the pins are cut flush with the bed, so they're just sticking through for locators. If the bed needs to rest on anything, it can sit on these plastic panels in case you roll the truck over or something. But I've never had a problem with these. The body's never popped off during rollovers. It's rolled over many times. Never had a problem with it. You can pick up the entire truck by it. Super sturdy, and it pops off real easy as well. Just like that, comes right off. So inside here, this is where I glued in those big fat magnets on the inside. Excuse the wounds on my fingers here. Glued in some big fat magnets on the inside. Used some Gorilla Glue, super glue to fasten these bad boys. There's the tire chains in the bed. And they are not going anywhere. Just for the new guys as well, RC four-wheel drive aluminum truck bed toolbox, full length. I also glued some magnets on the rails of the toolbox here and up on the roof. Keep that lid closed. That way, if you roll the truck over, once again, you're not getting a complete yard sale going on. There is a winch anchor spike mounted to the roof. I used a Proline light bar, some Proline light bar mounts to mount this up. That's mainly for decoration. I attach my winch to it. I do have some other ones down here that I usually use during filming instead. But that's just basically up there for decoration to try to tie the light bar in a little bit better. And that's a Proline 6-inch curved light bar, I believe. And the magnets are definitely working. I just flipped my body over and I've got shock springs and truck parts and everything else sticking to this thing. And since we're looking at the body, I have some Velcro mounts here for a smaller LiPo battery that I can use to run my lights. I usually run everything off of my main truck battery, but I do have a small LiPo battery. I can put it in the back of my truck. I have a couple brackets that I made, or I can put it right here on my hood and try to shift the weight forward. I also have a high-tech waterproof micro servo mounted to my dashboard going up to a steering wheel. I can hook that up in sync with my steering on my truck. It does work. Everything is, plumbed in and whatnot, but it draws a lot of power from my steering, so I really don't like using it too often. But it does work and it does function. Alright guys, for the motor install, just looking at the truck, you'd think it was going to be a real pain in the rear end since the motor is clocked into the chassis. You'd think it would be real tough. Possibly removing the bumper, this cross member right here, maybe the servo. Not the case. I basically just, if I get our angles right here, all zoomed in, I removed this screw right here and the two corresponding screws down on the bottom, and just drop the whole motor right through the bottom of the chassis. Removed the steering linkage, everything pulled right out through the bottom. Bolted up the new motor, slid it back in, tightened things back down, loosened up the motor, tore a piece of paper off the back of an envelope, single piece of paper, wedged it in between the spur gear and the pinion gear, pushed everything closed so it was nice and tight without ripping the paper. Tightened the motor back down, spun out the paper just to make sure that we have our proper gear lash. So that is all nice and good. Whole thing, 15 minutes in and out. I also put some shrink wrap around the positive and negative wires on the motor. I like to do that just to cover up the terminals, try to black things out a little bit. Plus, it gives the wires a protective coating for, or an extra protective coating for, trail rubbage and whatnot. I like to leave a little gap up by the connectors, so I definitely know which one is positive and negative. So that's that. Give you guys a quick walkthrough on the truck just for the new guys. Old guys, bear with me. RC 4-wheel drive, Marlin crawler, metal bumpers, front, rear, rock sliders. Original Marlin crawlers. They're basically the direct copy of the plastic bumpers that come on the truck. I think they changed the design a little bit since then, since I put these on. Bumper mount on the front is a metal mount. It is 1-to-1 mount with the frame, so it is even with the frame on the front. Rear bumper mount is a drop-down front bumper mount, and it's mounted upside down, so it's actually sticking above the frame. Roughly, I don't know, in between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch above the frame. And here are those plastic panels that I was talking about for that little battery that I can run my lights off of. So that's how we have the back bumper fastened. And I also have my antenna for my receiver running through a plastic antenna tube going through the center of the bumper mount. The antenna really only comes up to about here, and then I have the little rubber cap put on the end. They really don't give you show you a good spot on the instructions on how to run your antenna, so that seemed like the best spot for the antenna. All right, guys, the plastic panels on the side, I'm sure that's killing people, especially that they're not black. I need to paint these black. Every time I go to get some spray paint, I just end up forgetting about it. But I'll paint these black here pretty quick. The only reason they're here, once again, is just to accommodate or just to compensate for the body mount or for the body lift, to cover up that gap in the bed and to hide all these wires. Once again, there's the mounts in the back, which are cut off flush, so they just, work as locators. These shock hoops, people are probably wondering why I don't run these. They set up quite a bit higher than the stock shock location. If I move my shocks over here, I actually lose suspension and articulation. I really just need to measure these out so I can get a proper size shock for it so I can actually use those shock mounts. Those are the stock mounts. I just took them from the front, moved them to the back. Have the Glenda 2 shock hoops on the front. Z-boxes, Terraflex revolvers, no Z-boxes. Back to the front, RC 4-wheel drive Warren, 1074, 1274, not too sure. Suffix fishing line, 36-pound test, lead core, comes in a variety of colors. Savox SW1210SG metal gear servo, mounted from the bottom up to lower my servo to give me more clearance for the motor. I might need to drop that down a pinch more. I could use some super lift suspension lift blocks as spacers if I wanted to lower that down farther. Axial AE5 ESC, heard mixed things about these, but it's been in here since day one, been underwater several times, working good so far. Underneath that is an RC 4-wheel drive wireless winch controller, plastadipped. Over here is an RC 4-wheel drive wired winch controller, plastadipped. The wired one is hooked up to the 4th channel on my receiver, and that is working as a radio controlled light switch for my LED lights. I have that hooked up as a 2-position switch, everything cranked up so it's getting maximum voltage. The wireless winch controller is hooked up to a Y connector, and it's getting its power off my shift servo, which is plugged into channel 3. Channel 3. Receiver is a Spectrum SR415, somewhat waterproof receiver. It has been plastadipped thoroughly, 3-inch extensions on all the wires, plenty of plastidip between all the wires. Using the receiver box, holes drilled in the bottom to drain out water, big hole augered in the top to let that bundle through. Also have a Spectrum power capacitor going to my steering, which has also been plastadipped. Shiny stuff is dielectric grease. Use lots of dielectric grease on everything to keep everything somewhat watertight for going underwater. This servo over here for my shift servo is not the normal one. I usually run a Savox SW0230 or 0231. But currently I have a Spectrum S6180 digital surface servo, waterproof. That's basically just a stand-in. I have the other servo in my NQD for a steering servo, just because the Spectrum servo didn't jive with the NQD's VXL3M ESC, and the Savox one did, and this one works with everything in here, so just a stand-in servo. So that's what's there. Currently, Gen's Ace 3S LiPo, 2200 milliamp, 45C. And those are those two plastic plates that I was referring to. Alright guys, so there she is, all put back together, minus a new aluminum steering horn, or possibly a plastic one. We'll figure that out here for a servo horn. So that's it guys, thanks for watching. Happy holidays once again to everyone, and we'll get a video out. I don't know, maybe I'll take this thing out tonight, maybe tomorrow, we'll see, and try out those paddles. If I don't like that 65 turn motor, I do have the old WLtoys brushed motor that I could put in here, or a 27 turn out of my twin hammers. We'll see. Definitely need to generate some more wheel speed. So that's it for right now, guys. Thanks for watching. Very much appreciated. All the old subscribers, all the new subscribers. Happy holidays, guys. We'll see you all in the next video. Thanks again.